Welcome, everyone, to the first edition of Big Blue Banter, a brand new podcast. And what better way to bring us in than Hell's Bells, the same exact music that brings you into every New York Giants home game. And I'm sure we've got a lot of fans who attend those home games listening in or will be listening in the future. And this is a brand new podcast. It's a brand new venture with myself and Jeff Magliochetti. Jeff Mags, I like to call him, who I will throw it to in 1 second. But just to give you a brief intro about myself before I throw it to Jeff, my name's Dan Schneier. I've been covering the Giants now for a few years. Right now, I've been covering the Giants for past 2 years with 24/7 Sports, also CBS Sports, and I am their beat writer. So I am on the beat, but nobody is closer to the Giants beat than Jeff Mack. So let's throw it over to Jeff. What's up, Jeff? Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Hey, how you doing, folks? This is Jeff Magliochetti, otherwise affectionately known as Mags. I am a writer for the Giant Insider, and I also do some work for Elite Sports New York. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffMags5490 or on my Instagram at JeffMags. This will be my second year covering the Giants, so technically I've been there as long as Ben Mag do. Maybe a little longer. My first game covering was the final game of the Tom Coughlin era, so sorry about that, Tom. But I'm here for my second full year covering the Giants, and I'm looking forward to a very interesting year and one that could possibly end in the icy fortress of U.S. Bank Stadium in Super Bowl 52. But we'll get to that, won't we, Dan?
We sure will. And don't beat yourself up over that, Jeff Mags, because guess what? We knew the fate of Coughlin before you signed on to cover that last final game by Coughlin. It was decided during the week, so you did nothing there. It's not a bad omen, nothing to worry about there. But again,
just trying to sound dramatic, Dan. I figured that'd be a good hook to get some listeners on this cast immediately. The man who fired Tom Coughlin, technically, you know?
I guess. I don't know if you want to be known as that guy, though, forever. I mean, that's a big burden to carry. But hopefully –
looking at the tweets I get on a constant basis of the Coughlin era, I get some very strong-minded people about that. Ungrateful fans, I might add. I mean, the guy bought the team 2 Super Bowls after all. But you know what? That's kind of why they invented Twitter, I guess, in the first place.
Yeah, and speaking of Twitter, I didn't mention in the beginning, but you can find me on Twitter if you don't already know at Dan Schneier NFL. It's DANSCHNEIER NFL or 24/7 Sports Giants account. And as for Twitter, you might also know Jeff from the Giant Insider Twitter. That's where he tweets out a lot from. He's the guy asking all the great questions in the locker room. One of my favorite follows. That's how me and Jeff hooked up. But we're going to get into this first intro episode now because it's time to talk about the Giants. It's week 1. We're finally here. We've got the Cowboys on the schedule. We don't know about Odell Beckham Jr. We do know about Ezekiel Elliott. And we're going to break the show down into 4 segments. It will vary during the year when we have games to recap. We have games to preview. But today we'll be focused on just the Cowboys preview. And our first segment, which we're going to get right into, of our 4 downs, will be just a preview of the game. And so the general storylines we want to follow. So I'm going to throw this to you first, Jeff, and then you can throw it back to me. But how does Ezekiel Elliott being announced as allowed to play for this game after the ruling that his 6-game suspension has been upheld, but he will be playing in week 1, how does that impact the game for the Giants?
This might come as a shock to you, Dan. It doesn't affect the Giants at all. They wanted Ezekiel Elliott to play in this game. You know, Ezekiel Elliott's suspension was first handed down on August the 11th, coinciding with the Giants' preseason opener against the Pittsburgh Steelers over at MetLife Stadium. Now, naturally, we asked some of the Giants about Ezekiel Elliott's suspension, and many of them all said the same thing. They said, we want Zeke to play. We hope he gets away on the field. Landon Collins in particular wanted to see him on the field. He basically said, to be the best, you have to beat the best. And Ezekiel Elliott is one heck of a running back, as we saw last year. Over 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 1 Salvation Army donation in the form of himself, of course. But you look at the Cowboys, first of all, as Giant fans love to remind Cowboys fans on a constant basis, anyone can run around behind that offensive line right there. And the Cowboys do have two talented backups, two talented veteran backups, one in the form of Darren McFadden, who's only 2 seasons away from a 1,000-yard season. I really feel for Darren McFadden because I really think he could have made a career out of himself if not for all the constant injuries. I never like holding injuries against a guy. It's never a good thing. Football's a very physical and dangerous sport, so if a guy's going to get hurt, it's understandable, so I never try to hold injuries against that guy. And also, Alfred Morris has been another big force for the Cowboys, a strong force, someone who the Giants have seen quite often, and the Cowboys, as a matter of fact. Of course, he started his career as a 6th-round pick out of Florida Atlantic with the Washington Redskins, and then he went over to the Cowboys last season, and both of them have put in solid seasons during their time in Dallas. And the Giants acknowledge that. They acknowledge the strength of the O-line. They acknowledge the strength of Dallas's backup running backs, and they were prepared for pretty much anything. But they do admit that Ezekiel Elliott is a bit of a difference maker. We talked to some of the guys in the locker room today, and there was really no reaction to the fact that Ezekiel Elliott would be playing week 1. Odell Beckham Jr. said he knew the entire time that Zeke would be playing week 1. Coach Ben McAdoo was asked for a reaction about Ezekiel Elliott being allowed to play in week 1. And you know what he said? He simply said no reaction. He said, we're ready for the best, and they're really looking ready for the best, and they're looking forward to the challenge on Sunday night. So frankly, I don't think this changes anything for the Giants. They're still going to come out with the same intensity, same power, and same defense on Sunday night against Dallas.
Yeah, and it doesn't make for great radio, and we agree, but sometimes that's just the case, and I couldn't agree more with you. In addition to what you said about McAdoo's comments today, earlier this week, McAdoo basically said it doesn't matter who's running the football if there's nowhere to run, and that takes me into one of the reasons I agree with you, because Jay Bromley, who suffered a knee injury earlier this preseason, was a full participant at practice today. He's back. He will team up with Dalvin Tomlinson, who got a ringing endorsement from Ben McAdoo earlier this preseason when he said, listen, it took Tomlinson some time. He needed to learn the scheme, but in the most recent weeks, in the final week of camp, in the last 2 preseason games, when Tomlinson finally got the scheme down and started playing faster football, he started to pick it up and he started to get it together. I think those two will form a nice rotation at the beginning of the season for the first 4 to 6 weeks. And remember, Jonathan Hankins was all name and no game last year. He earned his lowest grade Pro Football Focus over his entire career. To me, he's never been the same player since he tore that pectoral muscle. And I think this run defense has a chance to even improve with the addition of Tomlinson and Bromley into that lineup. And remember, Zeke did not have much success in 2016 against the Giants. Averaged 3.5 yards per carry against the Giants, had just 1 reception, was a non-factor in the passing game, just over 150 total yards in 2 games. And lastly, the Cowboys had a lot of offensive line turnover. Remember, they have a new right tackle. It's La'el Collins, a guy who does have a lot of talent, but he played guard last year. They have a new guard because Ronald Leary's out of the picture. So they have 2 new positions on the offensive line that could take a little bit of a step back there. So I don't believe Ezekiel Elliott will impact the game as much as people do believe. But that does take me to my next question. How do the Giants win this game if Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't play? And just to give the most recent update I have on Beckham, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he did some warm-ups with his teammates at Wednesday, was actually back at practice for the first time, even on the field, but didn't do too much out there and has done, he said he's done a little bit of running, a little bit of cutting, but he really does feel like a true game time call. I want to hear your thoughts on A, if he'll play, and B, how the Giants can win this game if he does not play.
Well, first of all, Dan, I don't mean to correct you by any stretch of the imagination. You're obviously
No, do it. I love it.
No, you're very knowledgeable in this. I'm just very surprised you forgot a man by the name of Snacks, the man champion himself, Damon Harrison, also lining up at defensive tackle for the Giants.
Oh, that's a given. That's a given, Jeff.
I brought in last year from the New York Jets. He did a great job of containing Ezekiel Elliott in the 2 games last season. Let's not forget, Elliott had 107 yards in the second game in the December rematch over at MetLife Stadium. Now, the first game he had 51 yards on 20 carries. He got his first touchdown. It was an 8-yard score in the third quarter, his longest run of the day. You could excuse that as, that being his first game and whatnot. But the second game, when his dominance was already being established, when he was taking the NFL by storm, he had 107 yards. Respectable, of course. But what you don't realize is that he got it on 24 carries. That's a lot for Elliott, and only his and his longest rush of the game was 15 yards. Very low for an Ezekiel Elliott type back. And Damon Harrison played a huge part of that. So let's not forget, just because we have a breakout candidate in Jay Bromley and a potential second-round steal in Dalvin Tomlinson, who, by the way, remember, as Jerry Reese told me back in April, is not here to do the team's taxes. He with a degree in both finance and business. So lest we forget Damon Harrison, the all-pro defensive tackle there. But back to answering your original question, what the Giants need to do, and they did a fantastic job of this in the December rematch, they need to neutralize the young weapons of the Dallas Cowboys. Lest we forget, Dak Prescott is the quarterback of the Cowboys, and Prescott was absolutely phenomenal last season. In my opinion, Prescott should have been the MVP candidate and not Ezekiel Elliott. And let me explain to you why. Let's remember the Dallas Cowboys are going to be missing Tony Romo this season. And Romo, by the way, just as a side note to Romo, I know this is a Giants podcast, but I want to wish Romo the best in retirement. I mean, I felt he got a lot of unnecessary flack, and he will be missed from a football standpoint. So happy retirement, Tony Romo. Best of luck to you over at CBS. So when Romo went down during the 2015 season, after, of course, he threw that game-winning touchdown against the Giants in Week 1, after he went down in Week 2, the Cowboys embarked on a 4-12 finish. Of course, Romo came back and started a bit of a throwaway game against Miami in November, but then he was replaced otherwise by the likes of Brandon Weeden, Matt Castle, and Kellen Moore. Not exactly, Montana Brady and Favre type of grouping there. And the Cowboys still had a 1,000-yard rusher in McFadden in that year, yet they still went 4-12. They finally got a backup in Dak Prescott, and in a rookie in Dak Prescott, selected in the fourth round. And you look at the many times Romo was injured over the years, the Cowboys had some very unsavory backups back there. They had guys, there's Brooks Bollinger and, oh my goodness, Brad Johnson, Kyle Orton at one point too as well. The list goes on and on and on. But when you look at Prescott, he came in and shocked the world and did great. And it's not just – and because of that, the Cowboys had a 13-3 season and took home the division title and played the Green Bay Packers pretty well in the divisional playoff. I think the best is yet to come from Dak. I think there will be regression this year from Dak, but nothing too noteworthy. The Cowboys are much more than just their sophomore quarterback and running back battery. You look at this team all around. You got Des Bryant. You got Cole Beasley. You got Terrence Williams. You have that O-line. You have the old reliable tight end in Jason Witten. So what the Giants need to do is shut down the Cowboys' offensive weapons. They can't get into a shootout with the Cowboys. And this game has the potential for the shootout. I mentioned the Cowboys' offensive weapons. Look what the Giants have on offense. On paper, that should be a very fiery offense. You have Eli Manning, the two-time Super Bowl winner and MVP, both times going through the Dallas Cowboys to earn those rings in the divisional playoff the first time and in Week 17 the second time. But look at the receiving unit. You have potentially Odell Beckham come back. And even if he doesn't play that game, you have Brandon Marshall who's going to be there. You have Sterling Shepard, who's looking to embark on a sophomore streak, a super sophomore campaign of his own. You have your first-round pick at tight end, at Evan Ingram right there. You have Paul Perkins potentially trying to break out in a new job as a starting running back. So the Giants would be wise to not get in a shootout with the Cowboys. Look what happened in December. It was a 10-7 defensive struggle. The only Giants touchdown in the game was that 61-yard hookup between Manning and Beckham, in which Beckham ran away from the Cowboys secondary on a slant, something we saw several times last year, most notably to score the game-winning touchdown in the Baltimore game in what I believe was October. And the Cowboys, they had one big play all night. It was a deep ball from Prescott to Terrence Williams, who got wide open. Some busted coverage made it appear that the nearest Giant was out in Ocean County. But that was the one flaw they made all night. They pressured Prescott. Look at Romeo Okwara. He was subbing in, an undrafted rookie out of Notre Dame. He was subbing in for an injured Jason Pierre-Paul. He got to Prescott and caused some trouble back there. He got to Elliott. And the Giants basically shut down the Cowboys' offense, neutralized their young weapons, and used it to their advantage. So if they can neutralize the Cowboys' weapons again, and as long as the offense takes care of business on their own end and perform to their billing that they have on paper, it could get kind of ugly out there in Arlington on Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, these games are always expected to be shootouts, and they rarely end up that way, at least recent years. 2019 in the first one, and then 10-7 in the second one. But what I'm looking for is just how the Cowboys will play the Giants if Odell Beckham Jr. is out, because the Cowboys were kind of that originator team that used that extra bracket coverage on Odell Beckham Jr. If you look at the two matchups last year, the Cowboys featured almost exclusively that cover two zone look with a safety over the top, but also that linebacker shading into the slants to really take away Beckham's advantage on those one-on-one routes. Now, if he plays, it's going to be a huge advantage for the Giants because they're going to see a ton of open looks Eli Manning is going to see with Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, and Brandon Marshall. If he does not play, Cowboys will flip back to a more traditional defense, I believe, with Rod Marinelli, a very bright defensive coordinator who's really done a lot of great work with that Cowboys defense with minimal talent. And in that scenario, I think the Giants can still win because I do believe that when Eli Manning and that offense, the way that Ben McAdoo's scheme is designed, when that offense is not matched up against pure cover two zone, they can really take advantage of that man coverage and one-on-one. So I do believe Brandon Marshall against the Cowboys' young secondary, it's going to feature rookies. And I do believe Evan Ingram against the linebackers of the Cowboys, banged up. Anthony Hitchens is out, for example. They're starting new guys in there at linebacker, at cornerback as well. And even Rhett Ellison and Sterling Shepard. I do believe all these guys, because remember, Orlando Scandrick has not been the same player since he underwent a major lower body knee injury. So with all three of those players, I do believe that they can take advantage of those one-on-one matchups if the Cowboys do go to a more traditional defensive look, if Beckham doesn't play. And that's what I'll be looking for. Because remember, this Giants offense is going to vary their personnel this year. They're going to use more two tight end packages. They're going to use a fullback finally, something they didn't use in 2016. So that's what I'll be looking for if Beckham doesn't play. But it's time to move on to the second segment because we did spend a lot of time on the preview, and that's fine because it's the most important part. But I want to hear about your favorite matchups to focus on. First, I'm going to give you two of my favorites, and then you're going to talk to me and tell me, Mags, about your two favorites. So I'm going to start with Jason Pierre-Paul against La'el Collins. We touched on this earlier, but Collins is starting at right tackle for the Cowboys, first time coming, and I think he's going to have a rude awakening against Jason Pierre-Paul, who's playing at his lightest playing weight since his rookie season, has looked explosive in the preseason, is a changed man since he had his 4th of July hand accident. He's become a different person, and he's become a leader in that Giants locker room, and it shows up in his play and his work ethic and his off-season training. He posts all those videos. You could just see the kind of shape he's in. I think he's going to be the deciding factor on defense because I do think Tyron Smith will neutralize Olivier Vernon. He's one of the best left tackles and offensive tackles in the NFL. And the other one I'm looking for is Dez Bryant against Janoris Jenkins because Bryant is no doubt healthier than he's been in 2 years. And this is the first preseason, first offseason. He's really hasn't dealt with any major injury setbacks. And Jenkins has his number. There's no denying it. If you look at the stats last year, they're unbelievable. Bryant had 2 catches, 14 yards, a fumble, an interception while targeted by Jenkins. And I think he has a lot to play for in this game, Brian. That really pissed him off. He went on Twitter earlier this offseason and said, the only reason Jenkins shut me down is because the Giants use a lot of cover 5 looks. That's debatable. If you look back at the tape, it looked to me a lot like Jenkins had one-on-one coverage with Dez. And Landon Collins talked about a little bit earlier this offseason as well when he said that Dez likes to win with his quickness, but Jenkins is simply a little bit quicker than Dez. As simple as that. And Jenkins, give the man some credit. He wins in a lot of ways, but he's also excellent at diagnosing route concepts and winning by guessing where the receiver is going to be based on his study and his work. So those are my two favorite matchups. What are you looking into this weekend, Mags?
Well, one matchup, you're absolutely right about that, by the way, and that's one situation where Giants fans will be glad that Dez did catch it. He had only 2 catches against the Giants last season, and one of them happened to come in that final game, and he ended up fumbling it in a fumble that more or less, a turnover that more or less sealed it for the Giants. The matchup I'm looking forward to the most will be Cole Beasley against Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. Cole Beasley was targeted a lot last season in the 2 times that the Cowboys and the Giants faced off. Cole Beasley was targeted 19 times last season. Quite often, considering Dak Prescott was a rookie, you expect him to find his top receivers in, Dez or Terrence Williams, but instead he tried to find Beasley and picked up, and Cole had 12 receptions on those, but all of them were fairly short receptions. He was limited to 106 yards, and you can thank Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie for that. Cromartie did a great job of covering Beasley, forcing him into drops, forcing him into short routes, and did a great job of neutralizing Prescott, especially in the first game. In the first game, Dak was limited to, mostly short passes. He was afraid to take chances downfield, something that he improved on later on as the season went on. But Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie kept Prescott in check. He led up the little short routes and was able to stop Beasley before he got to the first down line. So that's a matchup I'm really looking forward to this week. You mentioned Lyle Collins. I'm looking forward to that one too. And the other one I was looking forward to was Tyron Smith, excuse me. Not Tyron Smith. I was looking forward to Eric Flowers taking on the Dallas Cowboys defensive line. The Cowboys don't really have the best of pass rushes, and DeMarcus Lawrence last season, he'll likely be lined up on Flowers on Sunday night. Last season, DeMarcus Lawrence was a bit of a disappointment. 2 seasons ago, he had 10 sacks and kind of disappeared off the face of the earth last season. So he's looking to prove something almost immediately for the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense is a very interesting case. They're not the best at all. They're really, frankly, you want them off the field, and the Cowboys have taken that message to light. The Cowboys want to keep their defense off the field, and you see it. It's the same thing that worked for them during that 2014 season that you'll love to hear Cowboys fans talk about. They go on long, methodic drives to keep that defense on the field as short as possible. But the Giants neutralized that last year. They snuffed out the Cowboys' short plays, stopped it, hit them with great tackles prior to the first down marker, and kept the Cowboys defense on the field. So I think that's going to be key. If Eli Manning gets some time, we all know what he's capable of. He's a terrific quarterback, Eli, and he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame someday, and you see what he can do when he has time. But lately, he hasn't really been able to throw. We saw it during the preseason. We saw it during last season. It really prevented the Giants from being truly the best playmakers they could be. And DeMarcus Lawrence is looking for a redemption season. He's a heck of a pass rusher, and I think Flowers lining up on Lawrence is definitely going to be something to take a look at on Sunday night. Flowers especially, talk about a guy looking for redemption. Flowers, I think, is getting real tired of being the scapegoat for the Giants' offensive line. Like, every time Eli or Josh Johnson or Geno Smith or Davis Webb got pressured, even if they were nowhere near the game, you could just hear the fans blaming Eric Flowers. I remember there was a sack in the first preseason game that Josh Johnson, who was recently cut in the recent roster purges, Josh Johnson more or less ran directly into TJ Watt during the first game, and he got taken down, and people immediately started blaming Eric Flowers when it really wasn't his fault, and Flowers did pretty much all in his power he could do. So Flowers is getting real tired of being the scapegoat on this Giants offense, and I think he's going to be someone to watch on Sunday night. The Giants still truly believe that he could live up to his top 10 selection that they made a few years back. They said it all offseason. It was one of the biggest questions we were asking the Giants management after the playoff loss to the Green Bay Packers is there a place for Eric Flowers in this team? What are you going to do with Eric Flowers, et cetera, et cetera? And they believe in him. Jerry Reese, the general manager, and Ben McAdoo, the head coach, believe in Eric Flowers, and he can get his own redemption season off to a great start on Sunday night. So Beasley versus Rodgers-Cromartie, that's going to be something to watch, and a battle of guys seeking redemption. DeMarcus Lawrence against Eric Flowers.
Yeah, no doubt. And Flowers actually had his best game of the 2016 season in that final game against the Green Bay Packers. And I agree with you. In that first preseason game, there was one sack you talked about where it's Josh Johnson's fault. There was another sack where Weston Richburg got pushed back right into Josh Johnson. Pocket collapsed, and it ended up being the guy matched up against Flowers. So the announcers announced it as Flowers giving up the sack, but Pro Football Focus fixed that later, and they showed that it wasn't Flowers' fault. Flowers has been improved this season. I don't totally agree with the Jerry Reese and Ben McAdoo coach speak, GM speak upside to Flowers. I think he has some obvious and I guess the word would be non-fixable flaws in his technique. You can kind of see the difference when you watch Chad Wheeler play. I know it was a full game in preseason 4 in the fourth game against a bunch of third stringers who were released, but he just did look a lot smoother, a lot quicker with his feet, and a lot quicker with his hands than Flowers. Hopefully Flowers can improve that as time goes on. We'll see. We know he has all the other tools. And I definitely like the call on Cole Beasley as well because he had 70-plus targets last year, and he's just developing his rapport with Dak. But let's move on to the third segment, and we're third down. We're digging into some of my favorite quotes from this week's interview so far. It's only Wednesday. We have more coming on Thursday. We still don't even know what's going on with Odell Beckham Jr., and I don't think we'll know that until Sunday. But I love this quote today from Ben McAdoo. He said, "If you know who's playing corner for the Cowboys, you can let me know." It was taken completely out of context by Dave Hellman. I don't want to call him out. He's a great reporter for the Cowboys, does an excellent job. And I know this is just how it works on the internet, but I do believe that if you listen to the actual interview and you listen to how McAdoo said it, he wasn't trying to call out the Cowboys secondary. I think he was trying to do a classic McAdoo non-answer. You can tell me your thoughts on that as well, Jeff. But I do believe that that's the case. Now it's, of course, going to be bulletin board material. It's going to go all over every blog and whatnot. But that was one of my favorites. And then another one of my favorites, and then you can get into some of yours, or you could just talk about the ones we just discussed, was McAdoo on B.J. Goodson today. He said he looks like he's born for the position, but most importantly, he has earned it. And he's talking about the starting middle linebacker job. First, second, and third down, he's out there. He takes ownership of the defense, and I'm excited to watch him play on Sunday. And Goodson now, as McAdoo just confirmed with that first, second, and third down line, is slated to be the first three-down middle linebacker for the Giants since John Beeson, and he only did it for a few games at a time before the injuries took over. Really, since Antonio Pierce, if Goodson can stay healthy and do this for a full 16 games. So he's somebody for Giants fans to really get excited about. What were some of your favorite quotes, Jeff, or just what were your thoughts on these two quotes?
Well, first of all, Dan, as someone who was standing right near McAdoo during that segment, that was taken completely out of context. But come on, Dan, at this point, we're living in the Twitter era. Everything's going to be taken out of context. Everything is going to be condensed to 140 characters or less. Everything shows up on the opposing team's bulletin board. It was just McAdoo trying to be a bit of a Weisenheimer, and he has those moments like that, and he's been kind of known for it. And in fact, like when someone asked about Odell Beckham's status a few weeks ago when we were still in the training camp process of all this, someone asked about Odell's status, and McAdoo said he didn't practice today and he's going to be in treatment tomorrow, so you don't have to ask the questions. So that's just, it's a bit of a Benny being Benny type thing. I guess you get a haircut, then you start to feel a little bit bold. You know what I'm saying? But no, Ben's been very good so far, and his conferences are entertaining, and I think everything's been working out really well for him so far. So, Ben, you're doing a great job. Don't change a bit. As for quotes, we talked to Odell Beckham Jr. today, and he had some great quotes today. We're still not sure about his status for Sunday night. As we said at the top of the program, that you were right in your assessment. Odell came out today. He was on the practice field. He did some light stretching, then mostly worked off to the side, did some light footwork, did some more stretching, and then he went outdoors to do pretty much the same thing. Giants practice was moved indoors today due to inclement weather. But Odell, while just a brief participant in practice, he was a full participant with his media session today. And of course, this was the first time we're speaking to him since August 21st, when, of course, he was injured in that preseason game against the Cleveland Browns when Brian Bodie Calhoun went to him on the ankle injury right there. And we asked him about that injury. In case you don't remember, for those of you who forgot or didn't see it, Bodie Calhoun went for a bit of a low hit on Beckham. It hit him right in the ankle. Now, that hit completely legal by NFL standards. Completely fine according to the rule book. But many Giants fans took exception to that, calling Bodie Calhoun some names that I probably can't repeat, or else we'd probably get taken down before our first episode even ended. And Landon Collins also had some words for Bodie Calhoun the following play after that. after that. So we asked Beckham today about his about that hit, whether he felt angry with it, and Beckham basically said this. He said, "quote I guess it's part of the game. In my opinion, they made rules about safeties hitting high and it being a problem, and I know I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. I'd rather a safety hit me up high 21 times out of one time. I don't even know the ratio. I'd rather him hit me up there every single time than go low. But it's part of the game. It's part of the game that you risk getting fined. You risk a suspension. There's all kinds of things that a safety has gone through their head in the moment. So I can't really fault what happened. It just happened. It is what it is. It's life. Take it on the chin. You keep moving." I think that's a strong and positive response from Beckham right there. He understands the game, and he's absolutely right. The NFL created this quote-unquote monster when they began throwing flags every time there's a hit that even looks bad. Now, I understand this is all done in the name of player safety, and I'm perfectly fine with ensuring that these players are safe whenever they're on the football field. And I'm all for penalizing hits that are egregiously bad. But Odell is not the only receiver, by the way, who feels that the NFL has gotten a little harsh on the high hits.
Did you see Glover Quinn's quote? I don't mean to cut you off, Jeff, but this was one of the most surprising quotes I've seen from an NFL player in a while. He told our Lions reporter, say Glover Quinn's safety on Lions, that Larry Fitzgerald, veteran receiver, one of the good guys.
I was about to mention, yes.
Yeah, get into it then. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, perfectly fine, perfectly fine. Larry Fitzgerald, according to Glover Quinn, Larry Fitzgerald has advised defensive backs to hit him high, and if they are fined for it by the NFL, Larry said that he will pay the fine for them. I've always been a fan of Larry Fitzgerald. He was actually my keeper in one of my fantasy leagues this year, so good guy right there. But anyway, I think that just signifies and calls out and puts a spotlight on the league, on the type of play that the NFL has created. They've discouraged high hits, and in doing so, players have aimed low, defenders have aimed low, and it obviously put Beckham in a world of pain during that preseason game. So that's what I took out of his quotes today. I also thought it was very interesting today. He also said, I mentioned before, how he said, basically, I knew Zeke was going to play week one. And one thing excuse me. One thing I really found interesting today, he was talking about rehabbing correctly. He said he was itching to play. He also called this offseason's, quote, one of the longest off seasons ever in my life. I think Beckham has had time to reflect on his mistakes of last season. You know, there was the kicking that incident. There was obviously the boat incident. There was, the Josh Norman incident, which I know he was not to blame for a lion's share of that, but he did get involved. I think he's had some time to reflect on his mistakes this season, and he's going to come back stronger than ever. That's what I got from that quote. It seems like a bit of a throwaway quote. It seems like a bit of a cliche, but I felt it shows an ever so small sign that he's beginning to learn this NFL thing and that he's ready to improve, not just on the field, but off it too.
Yeah, and if you've listened to Beckham all offseason, you know just from everything you've heard that he's shown a lot of signs of that maturity that you just brought up, and I think it's a great point, Jeff. That brings us into our final and fourth segment. Final hot takes, final score predictions, or any kind of bold predictions you have. I'm going to start with mine, and then we can get into yours, and we can wrap it up. My hot take is that not only will Odell Beckham Jr. play, but the Giants will actually run away with this game. I think it's going to be a 34-14, just dominating performance out of the Giants. I believe the Giants will continue to basically use the same blueprint on defense, and it's going to limit Dak Prescott just by forcing him to make quicker decisions via the blitz. They're going to blitz a lot because they have the luxury of continuing to play Dez Bryant with single coverage with Janoris Jenkins. And I know you brought up Terrence Williams, but to me, he's one of the worst perimeter wide receivers in the NFL. I did not understand why the Cowboys re-signed him. If you look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, he hasn't created separation on a consistent basis since entering the NFL. Cole Beasley's a big problem. Jason Witten's a big problem. But I do think they can scheme around the Giants defense by just getting a lot of pressure from different spots with Steve Spagnuolo. I think the Cowboys offense will struggle to move the ball outside of a few big plays and a few touchdowns with those two guys, Witten and Beasley. And on the offensive side of the football, I think the Cowboys will have some defensive breakdowns with a brand new secondary that replaced 3 of 4 starting safeties and cornerbacks combined are replaced this year for the Cowboys. They don't have a consistent pass rush. You talked about DeMarcus Lawrence, who has a lot of hype, but was not very good last season. They have injuries at defensive tackle. They have injuries with Anthony Hitchens at linebacker. Sean Lee might make some big plays, but at the same time, is he enough to flip things on defense? I do believe this Giants offense will get off to a much hotter start than people realize and expect, because I do think Eli Manning is one of the kings of the NFL in the pre-snap process. He will be able to diagnose the best two matchups. And this year, those best two matchups won't be Victor Cruz on the outside not creating separation and Will Tye not creating any separation in the middle of the field. It's going to be Evan Ingram or Red Ellison. It's going to be Brandon Marshall. So I do believe the offense will roll. The defense will continue what we saw in Week 14. And my final take is 34-14. Where do you see this rolling, Jeff?
Bit of a bold take on your part, Dan, because I was always told there were four certainties in life: death, taxes, Rodgers over Cutler in the Packers-Bears game, and the Cowboys and the Giants are going to play a game that goes down to the final minute. Yeah. And I think that's going to
– history is on your side, by the way.
No, yeah, you look at the Cowboys-Giants matchups. It seems like every single time it's decided in the final minute. I think this is going to be another one of those one-possession games. The Giants last season repeatedly announced desires, coaching staff and players included, repeatedly they announced desires to blow teams out. They wanted to win games by 34-14 finals, like you said. I still think, however, that this offense is a work in progress. I do think the Giants are going to squeak out a win on Sunday night. I think, as they often seem to, it seems like every time the Cowboys are on Sunday night, some sort of calamity seems to strike them, or maybe that's just me. But what I think is going to happen is it's going to be another one of those games that come down the wire. The Giants' offense is still going to be a work in progress. I think that they won't be able to take advantage of a few opportunities but that the Cowboys' defense allows them, but they'll be able to take advantage of enough opportunities. We keep in mind, for as much as amazing and as show-stopping as the Cowboys' offense is, that defense is a bit of a nightmare. You want to talk to any Cowboys fan, just you want to make them mad. Just say the words to them, 3rd and 20. That, of course, was the down and distance last season that Aaron Rodgers found Jared Cook to set up the game-winning field goal in the NFC divisional playoff last year, a game where the Cowboys made up a huge deficit but still came up empty-handed over at AT&T Stadium, the site of Sunday night's game. The Cowboys' defense was scary enough as is, and we're forgetting that they basically took this offseason and replaced the people they lost with literal NFC East rejects. I mean, Nolan Carroll at cornerback, that was a guy that Des Bryant used to torch repeatedly when he was in Philadelphia. And I know he's suspended for this game, but Demontre Moore as well. Let's hope that you may remember Demontre Moore. You, Dan, and Giants fans out there listening to this, you may remember Demontre Moore as the guy who tried to fight Colin Jenkins over a free pair of headphones, his own teammate. So have the beats ready if you're Dallas right there. They literally tried to plug their holes with NFC East rejects. I, however, am expecting a close game. I see a lot of people predicting Dallas to stumble a bit this year, to fall a little bit. And I think they will. I don't think they're going to win 13 games again, but I think there is too much young weaponry on this offense for that big of a dropout. However, the Giants, they have the talent, they have the desire, they have the defense. Defense is an increasingly exclusive commodity in today's NFL. An NFL that basically worships the quarterback. An NFL that plays to the desires of fantasy football. Throwing for 400 yards in a game used to be taboo for a quarterback. Now you see basically it happens every single week in today's NFL. 150 yards receiving for a receiver a week, that used to be an anomaly. That used to be shocking, but nowadays it's commonplace. And the Giants defense shut down several high-powered offenses last year, including the Dallas Cowboys. The Giants defense bailed them out on several occasions last season. I think that's going to be another case of this week. The Giants offense will break out at some point this season, but I think it's going to take a game or two, whether it's this week against Dallas, whether it's next week against Detroit, and the week after against Philadelphia. It's going to take them a while to acclimate to this new offense, to get it down a little bit, and finally get it rebooted. But the Giants will prevail in this game. I'm predicting a game somewhere in about the 17-14 range on Sunday night.
You heard it here first from Jeff Maggs and Dan Schneier. Once again, Jeff, before we close this show out, let's remind everyone where you can find us on Twitter or any other social media platform. So let us know again where we can find you, Jeff.
Dan, I just realized something. We've been doing this show, and I forgot to announce to our listening audience, I'm not spelled commonly. My name is not the common spelling of Jeff. It's actually Geoff, not Jeff, like my favorite NASCAR driver, Jeff Gordon, or the Jurassic Park hero, Jeff Goldblum. It's Geoff, much like the famous giraffe and Toys R Us mascot of the same name. So you can follow me on Twitter at JeffMags5490. Jeff Mags, GeoffMags 5490, 54 being my number in college when I played football, and 90 being my number in high school when I played football. I was a long snapper and an outside linebacker during those days. Let's just say there's a reason I'm covering this sport rather than playing it, Dan.
And go ahead, sorry.
So you can follow me on Twitter at JeffMags5490. You can also follow my daily coverage of the Giants over at Giant Insider. That's at Giant, no S, Giant, Insider, INSIDER. And you could also follow my Instagram at Jeff Mags. So that's at Jeff Mags 5490 on Twitter, at Giant Insider on Twitter, and on Instagram at Jeff Mags, and also same at Giant Insider on Instagram for us as well.
Awesome. And you can find me, guys, as always, at Dan Schneier NFL on Twitter. That's DANSCHNEIER NFL on Twitter. Same name, same account for Facebook, where I do put a lot of my links and a lot of my work. And as always, follow Giants on 24/7 Sports on Facebook for the latest Giants news and everything else you want to know about the team. For Jeff Mags, this is Dan Schneier, and this is the first Big Blue Banter, hopefully the first of many. Big Blue Banter. Sorry, it's going to be tough for even me to say at the beginning, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the show, and hopefully we see you next week.